On Saturday, impatience wakened her. Impatience, not nervousness or second thoughts, and the remarkable sense of relief that she had reached this day at last. There was nothing else for her to plan or picture to herself. Within a few hours, she would have come to the simplicity of the fait accompli. She read in La Prensa that the Nord Star 9 from Malmo was to weigh anchor that night from Pier 3. She telephoned Lowenthal, insinuated that she had something to tell him in confidence about the strike, and promised to stop by his office at nightfall. Her voice quivered. The quiver befitted a snitch. No other memorable event took place that morning. Emma worked until noon and then settled with Perla, Kronfus, and Elsa on the details of their outing on Sunday. She lay down after lunch and, with her eyes closed, went over the plan she had conceived. She reflected that the final step would be less horrible than the first, and would give her, she had no doubt of it, the taste of victory and of justice. Suddenly, alarmed, she leaped out of bed and ran to the dressing table drawer. She opened it. Under the portrait of Milton Sills, where she had left it night before last, she found Fane's letter. No one could have seen it. She began to read it, and then she tore it up. To recount with some degree of reality the events of that evening would be difficult and perhaps inappropriate. One characteristic of hell is its unreality, which might be thought of to mitigate hell's terrors, but perhaps makes them all the worse. How to make plausible an act in which even she who was to commit it scarcely believed. How to recover those brief hours of chaos that Emma Zunz's memory today repudiates and confuses. Emma lived in Almagro, on Calle Liniers. We know that that evening she went down to the docks. On the infamous Paseo de Julio, she may have seen herself multiplied in mirrors, made public by lights, and stripped naked by hungry eyes, but it is more reasonable to assume that at first she simply wandered unnoticed through the indifferent streets. She stepped into 2 or 3 bars, observed the routine of the maneuvers of other women. Finally, she ran into some men from the Nord Star 9. One of them, who was quite young, she feared might inspire in her some hint of tenderness. So she chose a different one, perhaps a bit shorter than she, and foul-mouthed, so that there might be no mitigation of the purity of the horror. The man led her to a door and then down a gloomy entryway, and then to a tortuous stairway, and then into a vestibule with lozenges identical to those of the house in Lanús, and then down a hallway, and then to a door that closed behind them. The most solemn of events are outside time, whether because in the most solemn of events the immediate past is severed, as it were, from the future, or because the elements that compose those events seem not to be consecutive. In that time outside time, in that welter of disjointed and horrible sensations, did Emma Zunz think, even once, about the death that inspired the sacrifice? In my view, she thought about it once, and that was enough to endanger her desperate goal. She thought, she could not help thinking, that her father had done to her mother the horrible thing being done to her now. She thought it weak-limbed and astonishment, and then immediately took refuge in vertigo. The man, a Swede or Finn, did not speak Spanish. He was an instrument for Emma, as she was for him, but she was used for pleasure, while he was used for justice.